And I'm happy to give a broader overview of what Catona is and that sort of thing as well.
Perfect. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us today. And we have a couple of things to talk about, but like I said, we just met our guest for today, Tracy Bain. She's from Catona. We met through Meet Green. And Tracy, thanks so much for joining us. I'll go ahead and start with your portion of the meeting then, since we kind of jumped right into it. So, a little background of why we were reaching out to meet somebody like Tracy is because we wanted to have some extend some of our advocacy within APSA. And Colleen is really kind of leading this one, but we had talked about making a formal proposal to the APSA board based on the findings from Colleen's paper on travel emissions to help the organization understand like how much carbon emissions we are generating from our meetings and how we might be able to mitigate that or offset it um, through carbon offset credits. And then as we were kind of getting into that discussion, we had a lot of questions about exactly how much that would be, how that would look like, who purchased it, how we collect it, da 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 da. And I didn't feel like I could get the right answers for you guys, but hopefully Tracy can answer these questions for us. So Tracy, go ahead.
I will do my best. And hi, Hannah. Nice to meet you. Hello. Well, let me give you guys an overview of what we do. We can talk and I can summarize a little bit about the conversations we've had so far, Linda, and with Colleen. Is Colleen joining, by the way? Is that
She said that she may be able to join like the latter half of the meeting.
okay? Yeah,
She
no
has a
problem at
conflict
all.
in the beginning.
No problem at all. And we can always go back and forth on some of the numbers further on email with her too, if that's helpful. So sure, let me kick off here. So as I said, I work at Catona Climate. Catona is a climate investment company, and we work closely with carbon projects all over the globe, particularly nature-based solutions carbon projects, but also other types as well, as I'll talk about today. We are first and foremost an investor into those projects, and then we work with buyers. So these could be large companies, these can be small companies or organizations looking to purchase carbon credits to offset their emissions. So we're a little bit full scope. So we do everything from invest in the projects themselves, then to help the sales and to sell those credits. My role specifically, I oversee our carbon portfolio. So I that what that means is I work really closely with all of our project partners. I do a lot of site visits, I get on the ground, and my background is in broader organizational management as well as monitoring and evaluation. So a lot of data background. And for the purposes of this, and the conversation we've had to date, in the past, we have worked with different types of organizations or companies doing conference offsetting, travel offsetting. It is a smaller side of the work that we do now because we've shifted more toward working with larger companies making like hundreds of thousands of credit purchases, like the big names out there, like Microsoft and Meta and such. However, um, we still want to be able to work with you guys. And since I know Carmen from Meet Green personally, it was really nice and lovely to be able to be connected with you guys to enable the possibility for us to support you. So to give a little bit of an overview of how it would work, this is part of the conversation Linda and Colleen and I have been having. So we can sell carbon credits to your organization. And I'm not sure if who that would contract through. Would that be APSA or a specific one of the organizations that you guys work with? We can figure that out later. But essentially, once you've determined how many credits you need based on your missions for a conference, which is the work that Colleen had done, you then determine what type of credits you might be interested in. And so when you think of a carbon credit, which is coming from a project, that means it's 1 ton of CO2, a metric ton of CO2, and you can choose all different projects out there. So you can have nature-based solutions projects, which can be things like reforestation, regenerative agricultural projects. You can have different types of more industrial-based projects that are changing refrigerant chemical solutions to something that is has a lower greenhouse gas emission and global warming potential. There are also different types of like renewable energy credits and such out there. So depending on your mission, depending on also budget, and really depending on what your goal is for carbon offsetting, you can select different types of projects. We have four major ones right now that we could offer directly. And if you guys were interested in other types, then we would have to go out to what we call the spot market to be able to purchase other credits on your behalf. But to make it simpler and easier, we have four at the moment, four different projects that I can walk through. But I'll pause a minute. Hi, Colleen. Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
I was just going through and giving an overview of Catona and then an overview of the carbon offsetting process and what that looks like. And I haven't really dove into any of the projects yet, but I'll probably pause before getting to that. The last thing that I'll just note to kind of complete the overview of the process, for all the carbon projects, in order to actually be able to offset emissions, you have to retire those credits. So that means all of the credits are managed by carbon registries. There's a number of different carbon registries. There's four major ones globally. All the credits that we have are within one of these four major registries. They're basically, you can think of as like the main accounting system and management or manager. And so we have an account with each of these registries. You have to pay like transfer and retirement fees to the registries. And what we can do for our buyers, which would be you guys in this case, is we can either retire credits on behalf of a buyer if that buyer doesn't have an account themselves with that registry, or we can transfer those credits to a buyer's account and then they can retire. But what's important to note is that until you retire the credit, it doesn't become an offset. So when you want to get to the point to actually say, we're offsetting, you'll have to retire that. And that's when the actual transaction happens and it's recorded in that registry's ledger, essentially. And that credit can no longer be used to offset any other ton of CO2. So I'll pause there a moment and see if anyone has questions so far.
So what happens to credits that don't get retired? Like, what do those do?
They basically sit in people's accounts. So they could be sitting in the registry account and just haven't been sold yet. They can be sitting in a buyer's account. Sometimes buyers hold on to credits as like a backup, a buffer. There's also carbon credit insurance companies out there now that buy up carbon credits and they will actually then resell them as part of an insurance um, business model. So basically they sit there in these registries until they're retired. So they exist. It's a real credit. It represents a real, metric ton of CO2, but it is not an offset until someone actually physically retires it.
I don't think I'm fully understanding.
It's okay.
So, and I'm sorry because I missed the beginning, so you may have covered this, but like, let's say we buy carbon offsets or carbon credits for a project that's, I don't know, uh, taking like fuel stole, so like we're getting rid of charcoal ovens or something like that. I don't know,
Mhm.
I'm just totally making that up.
Yeah.
You paid the money, you've made the change, or the change has gone into the project, right? So presumably the change has happened.
Already happened. If there's credits, that means that the change has already happened. So it's real, meaning it's like material, it's happened. Yep.
So I'm saying if an organization bought credits and didn't retire them, can they like resell them and can they like turn a
Yeah.
profit on them? Is that like what this is becoming as like a carbon
Yeah.
like market?
Exactly.
Okay.
Totally. There's like brokers out there. I mean, it's like any other market-based mechanism now. And that's absolutely what brokers and resellers and such do out there. And so And and I'll say though, it sounds like, it's just turned into like a business thing. But the reality is, what this means is that a lot of these projects on the ground, like your example of like an improved cook stove project, we're helping, communities around the world go from burning lots of just trees that they're deforesting from their area to actually burning less or completely changing their fuel or reforesting an area. they're able to get more long-term sustained financial investment because investors are then able to sell carbon credits, and that's their return on investment. And that's how Catona works. So we are one of those companies that invest in carbon projects around the globe, and then our return for that investment is comes from the sale of carbon credits. My background's actually in international development and conservation and restoration. And so I used to work for a lot of nonprofits where we would go after grants and we would get grant funding, and there would be like a 2 year cycle. And then you'd be, going after and writing proposals again. And you would do this over and over, and you never knew if you actually had sustained funding. But with the carbon and like uh, climate financing, you could think of, or carbon financing, you can sign a contract with an investor for 10, 20, 30, 40 years sometimes and have really long-term sustained investment, and in particular, upfront investment for a much larger scale project. So when done really well, the carbon market's really effective for a lot of these projects that wouldn't get off the ground. There's always bad actors everywhere, and so we always want to be transparent about that. And that's in both the regular international development sector and in this sector. But that's why it's so important to track and ensure that projects have high quality from the start. That was probably a lot more than you wanted to know, but
No, it actually
it's an
makes the whole
interesting
thing make
space.
sense.
So for your purposes for the conference, you guys, and I mentioned in my email, so we are not a carbon footprinting company. There are consultancies that do that kind of work, but it sounds like, Colleen, you've done a lot of that research already and determined the estimated emissions from your conference attendee travel,
Right.
at least. And so the one thing I'll just note for everyone here, as I did in the email, is our role is we can sell carbon credits to you and then we can retire them to make them offsets on your behalf. And then you guys you'll get a certificate that will say, that you've had this many credits and they've been retired and such that you can use. But I can't provide guidance on claims, and that's important in the carbon world. So there are, like big companies out there in particular always worry about what can they legally, claim. Are they offsetting? Are they supporting carbon reductions? There's different terms and words and terminology. And so I would just recommend that when you guys think about how you want to communicate your offsetting externally, just to think about, or if you have any compliance folks in any of your organizations and teams, maybe just to talk with them about that to make sure that you're in compliance whenever you speak about offsetting. You can always offset and then not talk about it, but people usually want to, right? That's part of the reason why you want to do it because it's part of your messaging and marketing. So that's the only thing. Legally we are not a compliance company, so I just have to say that.
Dr. Gal had one question.
This is very interesting. I have a couple questions. Based on what Colleen did for the past few meetings, and with an estimate of how much carbon we used, how much would it cost, for example, for a meeting? That's question one. The other question is anyone else, other meetings that you know of comparable size to ours, about membership about 1,500 people with meetings that have maybe 5 to 750 people show up at a city, one hotel. How much, like, are other groups doing something like this?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. Other groups are definitely doing this kind of stuff. As I said, we typically work in larger volumes, so we haven't done a ton of smaller conference requests, but all the conferences that I go to, for instance, which are a lot of the sustainability carbon conferences, they all offset their emissions. That's a part of the conference and a part of what they offer. And we're seeing other types of conferences doing that as well. But that's actually probably a good question, Linda, maybe to take back to Carmen, because she's, of course, working with all different types of events coordinators and organizers, and she may have some more specifics outside of the broader sustainability space where you typically see those types of conferences offsetting their conference, their attendee travel and such. So it is becoming a bigger thing. And we also see it, of course, across lots of other industries. So the events and entertainment industries are looking at how they can offset emissions from participants and operations and things like that. And then to answer your first question, the price really depends a lot. It can be, it really depends on the project type that you're interested in. The four projects that we have an improved forest management project. So that means it's a timber project that is they're all in the US, these projects. It means that they are improving practices to store more carbon in the forest and have better sustainability practices for timber production. We have a rotational grazing grasslands project, which means instead of traditional cattle grazing, where they kind of just eat everything in a field, instead they rotate to different paddocks, which allows the grasses to better regenerate and produce deeper root systems, which produces more carbon in the soil. So those are two nature-based projects. Then we have a project that works on improving refrigerant chemicals in grocery store chains across some of the states in the Midwest and East Coast. And that essentially, if you think of if you've had air conditioners where the tech guy says you can't use the old air conditioners with the old refrigerant anymore. It has to have the new kind. Same concept, different, better, less global warming potential refrigerant chemicals in those refrigeration systems for like the frozen foods in a grocery store chain. And then lastly, there's a project down in Florida that is doing, it's an adipic acid project, a chemical that's used for fertilizers, used for antifreeze and such. They are figuring out how to create this with less nitrous oxide emissions. So again, able to do so through carbon credit generation as well. So these are really four different kinds of projects. And the pricing that we have for those is going to range anywhere from about $10 to $18 per credit. So I looked at, Colleen, the totals that you gave me, and I converted it all to tons of CO2. And like I said, please check to make sure because the numbers will come from you guys at the end of the day. And I estimated that for your 2023 conference, you had about 270 tons of CO2 emissions from your attendee travel. And that range then looking at a $10 to $18 range per credit would be anywhere from 2,670 to, I'm sorry, 2,700. I'm just rounding up the dollar to $4,850. That is for the credits that we have available right now. As I said, if you guys wanted to go a lot cheaper, if you had a lot smaller budget, we can go to the spot market to find even cheaper ones. It's just harder for us to do specifically because, like I said, it's not, we typically don't work in tiny volumes like this, but we're happy to do so with you guys.
Okay, I have a question because um, Dr. Yao had asked about pricing, and I guess my impression was that the price of the carbon offset credit would be based on the person making the emission. So like the consumer, like us, me buying a plane ticket, like that the price would be based off of maybe like how far I traveled or something like that. But the way you're answering the question, it seems like the price is based off of the project that we choose to support.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly right. Your factor in the price will be if you have more emissions, essentially, then you need more credits, right? So that will of course increase the price. But correct, the pricing in the carbon markets it's based on two factors, I should say. It's based on the project itself. So some project types are really expensive. If we look at there's some different types of engineered solutions they call where people are building these big plants to actually pull CO2 out of the air. Those credits per credit can cost like over $100, $200 a credit. Really expensive. Nature-based solutions projects are usually a lot cheaper. So they could be anywhere from like under $10 a credit potentially for like just a forest protection project to greater for actual like restoring a forest, like planting new trees. So it really depends on the sector and the type. And the reason for that is how expensive the project is to run. So if it's a project that's not very expensive to run, like a forest protection project has fewer costs perhaps than one where you're actually planting a whole new forest and having to manage that. That is going to affect the pricing. The other thing that affects is demand. So if buyers are willing to pay more for a credit or a certain type of project, then that will affect the pricing. So it really is like a market-based mechanism and depending on the types of projects and then the demand.
Okay.
Colleen, or
Can you just say the numbers again that you said as far as
yeah.
our
And
CO2, what it
I'll
would cost?
send this over to you guys as well. Like once you give me the confirm volume, then I'll send you a table that has the pricing for each of the projects specifically per credit against your volumes and an overview of each of those projects too. So I'll send that to you guys after. But so just estimates, like I said, high level. I don't have the actual numbers until I get the full volume and then go back to my colleague who manages the pricing specifically. But anywhere from 2,700 to 4,800 approximately for pricing for 270 tons, which was
Is
your
that is
So we're at
that
270 kilos, not tons.
correct. So I converted it from kilograms to tons. So
Oh, so you're
all
saying 270 it is tons, not 270,000 tons.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So then the
correct.
total cost, what did you say it would be?
Anywhere ranging from $22,700 to 4,857 technically dollars.
for the whole
That's
meeting?
an approximate.
So it would be
Oh,
$6 a
per
person if
person, that's what I
750 people went to the meeting, right?
And to also that's just for their travel, right? So you're not the assessment you did was not like the other conference things. It was just travel.
Right. So we could theoretically say, all right, we're going to ask everybody to pay $10 or make it like I'm just like spitballing, but we could hypothetically say this is a opt-in, right? So it's not like everybody has to do it. Round it up to $10. Figure it's going to come close to maybe covering the cost. Like we'd have to look at it year over year, right? And figure out roughly what percent opt-in for the credit, is it
Hmm.
covering the whole meeting, and then kind of adjust it based off of that, but it's not like a big expense that we're asking people to chip in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you spread it across, right, all your attendees, it's not going to be super high. And the other thing to consider is, do you want to do this prior to the conference? Do you want to do it post-conference? Meaning, what I mean is, I think, and this is why I said in the email, you can kind of average that data that you have from the past three conferences, come up with an estimate, have people pay that to, and this is where like the communication will be important to say, we are, estimating this is what the emissions will be, and we are offsetting this amount of emissions may or may not actually cover the full amount of the actual emissions from this conference. Because in that case, you would need to then do it afterwards, right? And once you then know who actually came and attended and what their actual travel and emissions data was. But you can do it in a way upfront, which is probably going to be easier to get people to actually pay for it upfront. And then just make sure you message like this is how we are estimating and working toward our sustainability goals or our emissions reduction goals or something like that. But up to you guys, however you would want to organize and sort that and communicate and what your goals are for offsetting for this conference.
Thanks so much, Tracy. I think this was a lot of good information for us.
Sorry,
Um,
it was probably a lot of information.
yeah.
And I'm happy to send a summary and, like I said, the table with both volumes and then an overview of the four projects that we have. And there's, at the end of the day, if you guys don't want to do this or you don't want to work with us, totally fine. But happy to answer any other questions. And I love Carmen and Meet Green and was excited when she reached out to connect us.
Yeah, she was very helpful. Does anybody else have any other questions for Tracy?
Kind of had a side question that for Colleen for Tracy, which was so I heard that we calculated how much there was for travel, but we also have an estimate for how much we use for the meeting, right? For food and washing the, sheets and stuff and all that kind of stuff. Don't we have an estimate of that as well?
Our calculation is just the travel. But
Yeah,
if you look at published literature, the travel component of an academic meeting is somewhere in the range of 85% of the total emissions. And so for the sake of being actually able to do the calculation, like knowing that we could figure out the distances and we had the emissions factors for airfare and car travel, that was doable. Once you start getting into like the energy and the energy mix of like Phoenix versus Montreal, it becomes a much more complicated calculation.
got it.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Tracy. I think we'll probably be talking to you again, but I so
Sounds
appreciate
good.
your time to join us on like last minute notice. Guys, I literally talked to
Of
Tracy
course.
yesterday. So she was so kind to join us. So
No, of
last minute.
course.
Thank
Absolutely. Then what I can do, like I said, I'll send over the information. Should I go off of the numbers that you sent me, Colleen? Is that the best volumes to work from right now?
I can send you for you just have the 2023, I think.
Yeah, I
So I
think
can
Linda
send
or
you
Linda, that's
20,
what you sent me,
yeah,
actually.
I can send you 2023, 2024, and 2025. And it would be interesting to see because like year over year, there is an increase in the number of attendees. But the 2024 meeting, which was out west, had the highest emissions per attendee just because of the geography. So it might just be kind of interesting to see what this looks like, for some of the different locations.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
feel
I
free
can send you
to
an updated.
feel free to share those. And when I get those volumes, then I can give you guys more accurate numbers on pricing. And then Kenneth, I think yours was a question on other conferences that do this. I'll try to pull a few others that I know that do it and just send, maybe they have some information on their websites and how they talk about it. So I'll try to send a few links over so you guys can take a look at that.
It
But I
would
would
be
still recommend asking Carmen too. She might have some other ideas.
it'd be interesting to see if there's any surgical meetings.
I have no idea about
Yeah.
that specifically, but I can see what other, maybe even just health medical
Yeah.
ones are out there that do that.
Yeah, and I can ask Carmen if she has any knowledge about that.
I know when we were putting the paper together, the American Thoracic
Right.
Society was doing it. The problem was they were tracking it for the year that the meeting got canceled because of COVID. So they knew like what percentage of people had opted in for the offset up till the point that registration closed.
Mm.
I can pull that article again. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I think it was actually fairly promising. I may be remembering it through rose-colored glasses. So I guess before I overstate it, let me pull the article.
Sounds great. Well, I won't take up any more time. You guys probably have other things to talk about, but really nice to meet all of you. Thank you guys for inviting me to join. And yeah, once you send the numbers over to me, then I'll get all the information over to you guys. I will aim to do it tomorrow because I'm off Monday and Tuesday. So I want to make sure to get you guys information quickly.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nice to meet you guys. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Ken, penny for your thoughts. What do you think? Is this something
I
you
was
think?
surprised. I was surprised at how low the cost was actually.
Yeah, I was like $7. Are we talking about $7 here, guys?
I was imagining five figures at least, like 10,000 or 15 or something like that. I mean, I think the concept of having it an opt-in, I think is a good thing. I think that you get a gauge as to what the membership wants to do. If you get five people doing it, it's not that popular. But certainly if you get like 25, 30% of people doing it, it's a good start. I mean, I think that the opt-in thing is certainly more inviting for people to do, and I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. All right. Well, we'll let you guys know more. When Tracy sends the information, I can forward it on to everyone, and you can get some more information. I'll email Carmen with Meet Green and see what she knows if she knows anything about like other surgical meetings and what they do and who does carbon offsets actually. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next topic, which is it's actually something Ken had asked Colleen and I. We were working on this real quick between our last two meetings. I don't know if you guys, the rest of you guys know about it, but it's making a site selection rubric for the APSA board to. It's not this next meeting, but like for future meetings, right? And so we put together something which hopefully will be useful. So there's here, let me pull it up. There's four components to it, I believe. Okay, hold on. Um, there's four components to it, I believe, and then the 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 main thing we wanted to know was a rubric to help us select the city site for future APSA meetings, taking into account the sustainability aspect for each of these potential locations. So one huge thing about this, because like Colleen had said, the travel um, counts for like 80% of the carbon emissions. So Colleen's work from before really factored into this. And then Colleen, you're probably best at explaining all of our geographical centers and radiuses and stuff like that, which I thought was brilliant.
So what I did was for the last 3 years, I took the number of attendees per location and just averaged it, right? So, on average, 35 people come from Boston each year. On average, 2.6 people come from Orlando, like whatever the case may be. So that gives us a sense of like over time, how many people are coming from each location. And it also helps to like take out the hometown meeting effect, right? So like if you look at 2023, like 20 people came from Orlando, and for the subsequent 2 years, I think it's been like two or three, right? So if we do this consecutively and have an average number over 5 years, like it helps to account for some of that variability. And then over time, it also does account for like, all right, like is the West really growing at a rate that's going to change the balance of things here? So I did one, the averages. And then the other thing that I did was I looked at how many people are in the Eastern or the Central time zone, and I labeled those as East. And then I took the people from the Mountain and Pacific time zones and labeled them as West. I included Canada and United States territories. So even like Alaska and Hawaii are grouped in the West, even though they're probably not in the Pacific time zone, but that was kind of like the groups that were included. And if you look at the percentages, there's roughly about 5% of attendees that are international, right? So if you didn't fall in one of those East-West categories, you got labeled as international. There's 80% of our attendees come from the East, and about 20% then are from the West. And so like we looked at a couple of factors there, right? So we could pick the geographic center, like we could do a geospatial analysis, which is one of the things that we want to do, and identify like where the center of the APSA membership is, right? So how do you weight like, 30 people in Boston versus 15 people in Phoenix, and then like what's the geographic center? So Wynn Sullivan, when we did the original paper, had made a map of the United States with the membership with like different sized dots, but that really was truly just a graphic. So she's looking in to see if she can actually do like a calculation with the software to see if we can come up with like where is that geographic center. Presumably, like if I had to just like pick a place in the United States where I expected it would be, like it would probably be in like Tennessee or Kentucky, like somewhere in there, just because of like, just if you look at the picture of the map, but like we don't exactly know where it is. But once we figure that out, like, do we always go to that same place every year, right? And maybe that's the right thing to do for sustainability, but maybe not the right thing to do from an equity standpoint for the membership, right? Because it's really not fair to ask everybody from California to come to the East Coast every year, but so one of our thoughts was, well, we should weight it based on who's coming to the meeting, right? So 4 out of every 5 meetings would be in the East, and then one would be in the West, and that would reflect the membership and the population that's actually coming to the meeting each year. And then if you look then all right, we probably don't want to go to the same place every year, especially if it's in some very random location and in a place that's not easy to get to. We're going to look at what are the cities that are proposed, right? And to be honest, Ken, you can probably speak more to this, but like, how do we come up with the proposed cities? Is it, whatever the basis for it is, but once we have those four proposed cities, then kind of run it through this rubric of, okay, like distance wise, like what is the distance from the geographic center of our membership to that city, right? Because that would impact then the bulk of the travel admission. So that would be one component of it. And as Linda and I were kind of looking at the map and coming up with this, we realized our distances would need to be altered, right? So for the year that we would be out west, we'd have to have different distances from that geographic center so that like all of the cities don't score exactly the same way, right? And then for the cities in the east, it would be smaller distances from that geographic center would be the breakdown for how we would score it. We kind of like spitball these numbers, just kind of doing a visual of the map. Once we actually have like a sense, if we truly are able to do the calculation, um, once we have that sense of exactly where it would be, then I think we can look at the map again and adjust the numbers. If I'm totally honest, I have no idea how hard or easy it is to do this calculation. I know Wynn said she's working on it. But if any of you already knows how to do it or knows somebody that does know how to do it, it might not be an unreasonable thing for us to get some outside help. I've asked a little bit around at our university, but haven't heard back from anybody yet. So just it is maybe a little bit of a complicated thing if you don't know how to use the software, I think is kind of my sense of it. So that was like the calculation for the distance and what we were thinking of in terms of where the membership live currently, where they're located and how we would account for those big travel distances and the airfare.
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
So are you weighting it based on like not like we're just purely going geographic center, or are we saying Boston pulls a little bit more towards Boston if Boston's sending, I'm making this up, 30 people every year? If they're sending 30 people every year, does the center move towards them
Yeah,
versus
so that's what I'm
yeah,
saying. Like it would be
yeah,
weighted, right? It wouldn't
yeah,
be like we put a dot on every city and come up
yeah,
with a center. Like Boston would pull heavier for 30.
yes,
And, Corpus Christi would be a lot less of a pull with, maybe four.
got it. Okay, understand.
If you had longitude, latitude, and number of attendees, it'd actually be a pretty simple calculation mathematically. Those would be the things.
I got airport codes.
They'd probably translate those. That'll work.
I'm not a geomapper. I work with one, and I agree with Rob. I think this is actually not that hard to figure out.
Okay.
Yeah. The math itself is pretty simple. And
Yeah,
Ken, you're probably right. There's probably I'm thinking about it like number two pencil and 3x5 card, and you're in the modern era. Like you plug that in, there's probably software out there that does it pretty quickly.
I,
I would
there, I,
think.
it is like there's ArcGIS is like one of the platforms. There's a
Yeah,
free one that I tried looking at, and I think it's probably if you know how to use the software, very straightforward, but not knowing how to use the software, it was not completely intuitive looking at it. Um, so
Colleen, people are going to have to factor in sort of, how people are interested in different locations aside from the things we're thinking.
right.
Fee
yeah,
and it's interesting, and Ken can probably talk to this. It used to be much more of a family. Do you remember APSA was the family? People used to go to Phoenix and there
Yeah.
was a lazy river and then San Antonio
no,
and that's really gonna I'm not sure if it's quite as much of that way as it was 10 and 15 years ago, but there's still a factor there where people are not necessarily going to want to go to, I don't know, Columbus, Ohio, that's so central. And so I wonder how we'll be able to factor that in.
I can make a couple comments about the so I traditionally it has been two in the east, one in the west, two in the east, one in the west. I don't know how they came up with this, but that's how the tradition has been. Totally agree with Richard. that in the past it has been much more resort type, and it's been a cost issue, which is why they've gone more to an urban city kind of meeting. Um, I guess Montreal would be considered that.
Yes.
Chicago is considered that. San Diego, maybe a little bit less, but it's still San Diego. And then, so now we're looking at whatever city is after that. You've listed the four cities that are being considered. How they came up with them? Well, first of all, they said, okay, it's got to be in the east because it was the east turn. And various things came up. There was no particular rubric in coming up with the names or the cities. People threw out cities in terms of, you know, is it close to places that people want to go to? Is it an attractive city to go to? Costs of the city, is it an expensive city? I honestly, with other people from New York here, I actually threw out the term, I threw out New York. Like, could you consider New York? And it was tossed out because it was too expensive. People, I said, it's got mass transit, it's got three airports, it's easy to get to, you've got a subway, blah, blah, blah. People want to go to New York, it would be attractive, but then it was immediately tossed up because it was too expensive. And so and they also, there was a little bit about, have we been there before? And so these were the ones that came up. There was no science behind it, quite honestly. It fell into four, and that's what the board said. Okay, we'll investigate that. And
And
so
I'm
they're
sorry.
having
Oh, I
they're
was just going to say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put it up. I
no,
didn't,
no, it's
I
okay.
forgot that I had, I
There,
forgot that I had them up at the top there.
I would just ask you all not to share that because that is something that is being looked at, and it's not secret, but it's not. I mean, if someone from Hilton Head sees it and says that we turned him down, I don't want people from Hilton Head to feel that we don't like Hilton Head. But that's how what came out, and that so there's people from Veritas. I think Tom Tracy's involved, and they go out to to the cities and look to see what hotels that they would actually be able to get into, some of the costing, and then they figure it out from there. That's what I believe that they currently figure. That's how they figure it out.
So maybe the sustainability is one part of the much bigger rubric, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so, and I don't know, like, do we collaborate with other people to like define what those other things are in terms of like location, hotel cost, and is that something that the board would be open to building, to not having this just be the sustainability piece?
I would suggest that we try rubric 1.0. In other
Okay.
words, whatever you end up now is going to be your first version. And you can say, okay, this is the rationale for why we weighted this. This is the rationale for why we included these criteria. And we've plugged in, our best guess as to what the rankings would be. And so we've ranked place A, B, C, D in this order based on a sustainability criteria. And they can choose to use that. It might factor in to say, oh, it was really close between A and B. A looks better for you from your list. We're going to choose A. It might factor in. It may not, but at the very least, you get into the discussion. You can then say, okay, this is how we figured it out. You may choose to use this, and if they love it, then you're good to go. You can figure out how to tweak it for next year for rubric 2.0. You say, well, we've totally forgot this factor. Let's figure it out, and we can add that in. Because when it comes to the West, you're totally correct. All this stuff comes totally crazy because none of them are going to be close to this geographic center. And so that's going to happen. And in fact, that weighting may suddenly go away because they're all going to be far away.
Yeah, we did different distances and weight change the scale. Otherwise, if we'd used the same one, all of
Yeah,
them would have been like 5.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we changed it for the West. I thought that was a great point. So the other parts of this rubric, one is the venue, which we don't have a venue for any of these. So this one,
Yeah.
and essentially, guys, like these parts underneath the rubric, I essentially made them up, like with one being the the worst and five being like the best. And just thinking like if we were looking at the venue or with these other items, what would be the best or sorry, worst, and then the next step up that they maybe have some sustainability goals, or um, they have an actual program, but they don't have any certification, or that they actually do have a certification, and then, so on and so forth. This can change. It doesn't really apply right now anyways, because we're not putting venue into this decision making.
I would suggest including it because they're going to end up kind of honing in on, this is the likely hotel for this city, the likely hotel for that
Mhm.
one, and you'll be able to figure that out. Like the hotels would usually, if they in fact are LED or they're particularly green, they'll advertise that.
Yeah, they
They're going to
do.
say, we have that. That might bump them up in certain rankings, but I would put that in there. It would also make the people visiting these places say, okay, what is your sustainability plans or current, whatever you guys do with sustainability. So it gets it into the discussion.
Hmm.
At the very
Okay.
least, it enters in stuff. I would keep it on there.
Okay. All right.
I
And
would
then,
agree. Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
sure.
kind of like what Dr. Guy was saying, I think even on like a larger scale, and I don't know how maybe this is too challenging to look up, but you can probably get an estimate of how many hotels within a city have these sorts of programs or anything like that to help kind of gear that maybe. And then once you're kind of saying, okay, we're looking at these two cities, then you can break it down further as you go. But I agree that including that within the original picking and choosing could be, I think that's a meaningful part of the process.
Okay, good. I hope that you guys would feel that way too. Then the next part of the rubric was also just having to do specifically with people who are conference attendees. Like for us, the one was the flight. Most of us would probably fly in, and then looking at mass transit once we're there, because all of us are like tourists basically. So the scale also, I made this up, total disclosure. Um, one would be like they had no public transportation. Two would be, they do have something, but it doesn't actually apply to somebody who's like a tourist coming in to an airport. Great, you have scooters, e-bikes, and bike lanes, but that doesn't help me. Um, and then, yes, you do have mass transit, but it doesn't connect to the airport. And then you do have buses that connect to an airport, which I thought maybe some people might do that, but and it's great that you do have a availability of a bus or something like that connection to the airport, but probably if there was a rail or a subway with connection to the airport, like let's say like DC or something like that, or New York, then most people probably would actually take that. And then
Can I actually just say something about the
yeah.
master piece
Hmm.
quickly? So, I did go back. So our initial paper was just about the air travel. But I did go back because as I started thinking about different locations, like I feel like the airport in Denver is like 100 miles from Denver, right? Like it turns out it's actually not that far, but it
One,
made me
but
question how much are we spending in emissions from the airport to the the venue? And so I went back and excluded the people that we assumed had driven to the meeting and then just took the number of people that flew in and figured the emissions for ground transport from the airport to the venue. And I'm not really sure like the significance of this number, but the percentage of emissions relative to the airfare emissions was really only like 3% of like the carbon, right? So it's a much smaller percentage. It's not zero. So, I think that I, I think it adds validity to including this mass transit piece as far as that component of the mass transit being available for the airport stretch of it. But then it also does raise the question when we give the numbers to say Tracy to do the analysis. Do you guys want me to give her just the airfare number since that's what our initial paper was built on, or do you want me to give her the numbers with this additional ground transport factored in as well?
Colleen, I think just the Just the first one. It's such a small bit. We're trying to do this as pragmatically as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
3% you said. And
It's not
in
much.
fact, it does make a difference in other ways because I think people have an easier time with their travel if it's not Denver, or you know what I mean, if it's not that long commute from the airport to the venue. So it's interesting that it probably has an effect on people in other ways. They don't think of the sustainability aspect. They think about the time aspect and expense even.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's an, an an important part maybe for just the rubric. Um, and as we're sort of like trying to assess whether which city we want to go to based on like a sustainability criteria, but honestly, like overall, it did seem to be like a pretty small percentage. Okay, so then the last one we were looking at, like again, we're just looking at cities. So it was the US Sustainability Development Report ranking is the last one, which is a ranking of how many cities in the United States?
I think it was like 150.
100, yeah, something like that. 150 something cities in the United States. This was done in 2019, and it ranked them from like top number one to the very bottom. And on sustainability, they had multiple criterias. It is pretty robust analysis. And so we kind of took their ranking and put the cities that we were looking at. But of course, like a very small city did not show up on the US development and um, sustainability report. So, you know, for some of them, we won't be able to give a value for this one. So it would only work for certain cities. But anyways, if you were in the top 20, then we gave you the best rank for that one. And if you were the 20 to 40, and then we just kind of broke it down below 80 or the lowest ranking. So yeah.
So who's the winner?
Who's the winner?
Yeah.
We don't know yet because we don't have our geographic center yet.
Just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah, okay, but you could probably figure it out. So if you slide back up, so what?
Okay.
So you
Nashville is the geographic center, isn't it?
it's probably close, right? So it's
Nashville.
close to there, so that's going to be higher ranked. I mean, you have DC is ranked pretty high already with Philadelphia, so
Hmm.
you're probably, I mean, you're going to be picking between DC and Philly based on these two, I think.
I think so.
Probably.
Can I make a comment there?
Yeah.
This is, by the way, wonderful and so logical and well pieced together and reasoned. Um, I missed there were comments earlier, and I'm sorry I missed whether affordability was in there or not. Like even just those two cities, you look at Philly versus DC, one's much more costly than the other. Um, and then it because I don't know, are we keeping this purely to the sustainability elements and
Yeah.
consideration? We okay, all right. Because I was going to say we're going to put those other things in, and there's affordability, and then there's getting back to the idea of the vibe of the conference. And I mean, I'm just one nobody member, but I personally like the idea of guiding it back toward a family environment. Of all the conferences that we go to as pediatric surgeons, this is the one where we have, I think, most of us have the most friends and internal connections to different phases during our training and careers, and it's great to have those families together. And I think my sense of it is that we've lost that a bit.
I
And like I
don't
said,
I don't
and it's
disagree.
okay.
I think this ship has sailed on that, though. I mean, I think it's purely based on costs that it's too expensive to be in resorts. I mean, I wish I could say differently, but I'm just telling you how I'm reading the tea leaves. I mean, I think the ship has sailed.
Yeah, and I feel like the affordability part of it, I'm sure the board will have plenty of, their um judgment and whatnot into it. And what I was hoping to contribute to this was just a way to evaluate each of these potential locations based on a sustainability criteria. Yeah.
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 I
Okay.
mean, that's the way I see this sort of playing out, don't you, as this being an advisory
Yeah.
with respect to the sustainability aspect, but there'll be the board and so forth to say, well, we think that Washington, D.C. is a cooler place than Nashville, so we want to do that, or it's more affordable, cooler, more affordable. All those different criteria will be the non-sustainability people. And then hopefully we'll have an advisory role to say, well, we're thinking about these two. What does your rubric think about these two? And then that would be it. Well, I don't think we'll ever be the deciders. Whereas
Well,
Colleen would have it in Columbus, Ohio every year.
well,
No,
no,
but
I mean, I don't necessarily want to go to Columbus, but if it like helps us decide between like, I don't
Yeah.
know, two cool places, like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's funny to see Nashville on there. Is that because so many people go there for bachelor parties and bachelorette things, and I've never gone there for like that type of thing. It might be fun.
I can't remember how it popped up, but it came in because I think mainly because no one's been there. Like we haven't been
Yeah.
there before for APSA.
Nope.
And I think the cost was considered to be a little bit cheaper and relatively central. So I think it popped in. Again, I tried getting New York on there. I tried, got
I
tossed.
don't think that's going to happen.
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
imagine? Your hotel room will be $790
A night.
per night,
We could
but that's for a
sublet all of us
shoebox
who
hotel
like,
room.
yeah,
Yes.
we could all
Yeah. Right.
sublet and like carpool everyone. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
One
Well,
Um,
other thing just to toss out as a discussion point, and it becomes like an interesting ethical discussion when you start talking about carbon offsets, but I mean, shit, we could have this meeting in Honolulu every year and just pay 25 or $30 in
I
carbon
know.
offset,
How much does
right?
that cost really, right?
So there is like when we think about this just from an optics standpoint, there is a little bit of like pay to play that goes along with it, right? And we're a pretty privileged group of people. So like I think we should do the offsets or think about it because it's truly the only way to offset your travel emissions. But there is like a political sensitivity that goes with it.
Yeah. Can,
so this
is
is all.
there,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you, is there a deadline that you want this to send the rubric to you?
Well, what I would suggest is that you probably want to do it sooner than later because you don't want to have them say, okay, we already selected the site, great, we'll talk about it next year. I think you want to slip this in while they're visiting all the places so you can actually slip in various questions from a sustainability standpoint. So I think the quicker you can get it, I'm not trying to rush you, but the quicker you can actually get this to a relatively straightforward write-up with a, recommendation based on what you know. I think that factors in. I think they could look at that and they could factor that into a decision.
Okay. All right. I'll try to get back to you quickly then. Do you know when they're going to be like done with all their visits
I
and stuff?
I think they're in the process now of visiting. I think Whit Holcomb. That's what. Now it's Whit Holcomb suggested Nashville.
Um,
Now I remember now. Yes, Whit suggested that. Yes.
Which year are they now looking at, Ken? Like how far in advance? You know what I'm
So
saying?
Chicago's this coming year. The year after is San Diego, and the year after is the one that we're looking at. So 26, 27, 28.
28.
Got it.
Okay. All right, guys, it's 8:02. I had a couple of other things on our list, but I guess we'll talk about it next time. But one thing before we go, um, we don't have Grace on, but at the advocacy meeting before, we had talked about making it, we want to get like our like message out and utilize like social media and stuff like that. And one of the things that we had talked about was for all of the advocacy committees that contributed to the seminars publication, they are asking for us to create like a one slide short infographic a la like Todd Ponsky's residence or, but you see them all the time now, like in every meeting. Create one of those things and with the goal to like post this to social media and get some conversation going. So ours was about like why should pediatric surgeons care about uh, um, sustainability and so anyways, I'll talk to, I was hoping Grace would be on, but I'll talk to Grace about that to kind of create that infographic. Okay. And then Colleen, did you pick a date for the survey on parental attitudes? I think you had sent out that.
I sent it out and I think we were like, it's bad timing for the summer. So I need to
Okay.
send out a new poll and
Okay.
work on that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good meetings. Good to see everyone.